Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter, and this is the show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happens. So we return to the adventures of Helga Farfenkugr, cleric of Tristilian, the god of agriculture, and we have just freed and had Orthick the ranger join our party in our quest against these cultists that have moved in on Helga's territory of all these farmers and farming fields and helpless civilians that she looks after. So, they are now her problem, it seems, and with Orthick on the hunt for them, it'll be much easier to track them down. Now, they take a moment and they eat and they drink and Helga levels up to level 2. She gets divine channeling and she gets a little bit of extra health, and that's kind of it because 5th edition is really streamlined and you don't have a lot to pick from. And they sit down and they look at the map that the cultist, that Helga got off of one of the cultists. And rather than, kind of sit and try to puzzle out what it says, because all the writing and all the margins is not in common, they're of a race that neither of them seem to know much about, so they can't read their language, of course. They decide that they need to go and get the cultist that was tied up on the roadside that Helga encountered at the very beginning. So 3 of them killed themselves, 2 took off running. One of them is still tied to a tree somewhere, and she tells Orthick about this guy and goes, well, he's probably still there. She had only been in this temple for like an hour, so chances are he's going to have a splitting headache, but he's going to be unconscious for a while. So Orthick loads up his crossbow. He's got some nice crossbow bolts, and he loads it up, snaps it into places like, okay, I'll lead, don't worry. And Helga's there with like a shield and chainmail, like she's not worried about being hurt by a bunch of dorks in robes. But there could be 12 of them hiding somewhere for all they know. So there doesn't seem to be any other rooms to the temple, so they decide to head out. And Helga asks him, like, on their way out, hey, do you know the god of this temple? And he goes, yeah, it's Arunani. She's like a nature kind of god of agriculture. Like, Tristilian is the god of, like, organized agriculture, and Arunani is, like, wild agriculture, like berry bushes and fruit trees and stuff like that. And she goes, oh, okay. So they're just kind of 2 halves of the same coin. He goes, yeah. So Arunani, another homebrew god it's not especially important, but it was good to actually find the name and tell it to you. But they give the place a once-over, and, they salvage what holy texts they can and what, other bits and bobs that might be useful. They pull a torch off the wall and put it out and put it in their bags and stuff, just in case. And they could probably sell those ancient holy books to somebody in, like, Keswick or like a main city somewhere. So they put those in their bags, and then they head out back to around where Helga tied that guy to a tree. And he's still there, of course, kind of bleeding from the head. And thankfully he's not dead. He's just going to have a nasty migraine when he wakes up. And Orthick goes, well, what do we do? Do we torture him? And Helga goes, no, of course not. We are, I am a cleric of Tristilian. Torture is not my way. And Orthick kind of rolls his eyes. He's like, he's basically a bounty hunter, and he doesn't have time for this bullshit. So they argue back and forth for a while. What are we going to do with this guy? And he goes, you know what? We at least need to take him somewhere safe so that he is contained and his buddies don't jump us. So why don't we take him back to Northway and find a cellar somewhere to keep him in. And Northway, like I said, is a very young town, so there's not like a guardhouse, there's not a militia, or rather, there's not like a bunch of police running around, no guards from the nearest city or anything. If somebody attacked Northway, they would ring the bell and everybody would grab their pitchforks and their machetes they use to cut down tree branches, and that would kind of be it. So there's not a lot of law enforcement out there, other than, I guess, Helga herself, who just kind of shepherds the people. She doesn't pass judgment on anybody because that is not a cleric's place. And, woe to the paladin or cleric who tries to, like, force their way of thinking onto others and wonders why the rest of their party hates them. It's better to lead by example to show that you are of the cloth, not to say, well, I'm not going to heal you unless you say a prayer to my God. Ha ha. That is a first-class ticket to not being given a potion when you're lying on the ground dying. So Orthick takes the guy and he basically carries him like a sheep. He takes his ankles and puts them on one shoulder and takes his wrists and puts them on the other shoulder and has to carry him all the way back to town. So Helga leads the way, and they do get some funny looks as they arrive in town. Says, don't worry, they take it at her word because, she's a local folk hero and she knows what she's doing. Don't worry, everyone. This guy jumped us in the woods, and he's clearly up to no good. We want to find out what he's up to. The local inn and tavern offers out their wine cellar, which is like basically the basement of the tavern, to serve as a place to keep him because it has nice, strong wooden pillars keeping the place up. And they tie him to one of them in a corner somewhere, and they say, okay, it might take a while for him to wake up, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to leave him there, and when he starts, like, shouting for help or making noise, we'll go down, and Helga will question him. So up until then, Helga had a couple of sub-quests to turn in. She had the herbs from Old Crowley she needed to give out to the apothecary. She got some ground tea leaves that she sent off in the mail to her mother, and she just caught the courier to send that on his way. So she gets a little bit of extra XP for finishing out all the sub-quests, and I thought that was kind of neat. Just a bunch of little chores that needed doing. There was some shopping that could be done. Sold the holy text to a curious vendor, got some fresh supplies, a couple of health potions, junk like that. Orthick got some, I think, some paralysis crossbow bolts. You shoot somebody and they go numb for like 30 seconds, and so they fall over and they're prone, so you can tie them up or whatever it happens to be. And they finish out all their shopping, they eat, Orthick drinks, and they end up celebrating because, Helga is his savior who came out of nowhere into the darkness to untie him and bring him back outside so he could, not starve in a hole somewhere in a forgotten god's temple. And so, they sing the song of the Green Dragon from Lord of the Rings, and Orthick's dancing on a table. He gets a little far into the old ale, so by the time our guest, the cultist, starts to wake up, Orthick is in no condition to question him. So he's kind of slumped over in front of one of the fireplaces by the time night falls, and by the time one of the barmaids comes and touches Helga on the shoulder and says, your prisoner is awake now, and he's probably hungry or calling for water. He's like, do you want to question him, or what would you like to do, Miss Helga? And so Helga, looks over at Orthick. This is probably for the best because, he's a bounty hunter. He would just as soon start pulling fingernails. That is not Helga's way. It is her way to be the more maternal sort, the good cop of the good cop, bad cop duo, if you will, to see just what this is all about. And I've got my notes here. And she goes down into the wine cellar, and she lights up the sconces so it's not dark and shadowy. And this guy is still tied to this post, and he watches her go around, and she kind of like pulls down his hood so she can get a good look at him. He's almost serpentine. He's not like a snake person or anything, but he's just yellow and flat nosed. I went looking, and I think the race that my DM had in mind was the Narik. And I forget what bestiary or what monster manual they're out of. But they're a yellow sort of people. Like they literally have yellow skin and no noses. So they're very easy to spot. But again, too exotic for my knowledge and too exotic for Helga's knowledge. So he is a curiosity, not necessarily scary, but just unusual, almost like a leper that has no boils, just kind of yellow, like he's bruised or something. And she offers him water and helps him drink from a bowl, and just kind of sits in the lotus position across from him and puts her palms on her knees to kind of see what this guy is like. And she finds out that his name is Adir, and he is from the Tongues of Fire cult. And out of the 6 members that Helga has seen, there's 2 out there in the wild, and then there's him, and the other 3 are dead. Apparently, there's 1 more. And Helga kind of talks to him, kind of, calms him down. I'm not going to pull out your toenails and cut your fingers off one by one. This guy is clearly frightened and didn't want to be a part of this cult from the very start. Apparently, the leader of the Tongues of Fire cult, somebody called the Red Mistress, had been twisting arms and threatening families and stuff that if they didn't come with her on her crusade across the land, that bad things would happen to their friends and loved ones. So not all of them were there willingly, himself included. But Helga offers him, in exchange for information, Helga offers him a fresh start. She says, everybody probably thinks you're dead at this point. You did not, your friend left you there in the middle of the woods. I watched 3 of your friends die. 2 of them are still out there, and the Red Mistress is still out there. They've lost track of you for, a day and a half, whatever it happens to be. You're dead to them at this point. Why don't you, hop on a boat somewhere, hop on a cart and go off to the next region, far, far away, where you'll be out of their clutches, out of sight, out of mind. They probably think you're dead on the road somewhere. And he agrees to this. He's not cowardly, but he's not up for running back to the Red Mistress to say what's happened and rejoin this cult that does magic by killing themselves. So he's all for the idea of starting a new life. So Helga gives him a little bit of money and exchanges out his foreign coin, and leaves him tied to the post so she can get more information. Apparently, the Red Mistress and her remaining minions are on their way to the Life Well. Now, the Life Well is a perfectly circular lake that is so wide you can't see across it. But the Life Wells were placed around the world by Tristilian, her god, and were meant to be the epicenters of holy water, and if you go there and bathe, you'll be purified, and all the plant life is very healthy around it. It can't be tainted by nothing that nobody knows about. And the nearest life well that Helga knows of, the only one that she knows particularly where it is beyond the Gulgith Pass, and that's a canyon that is collapsed like a steeple. So she looks at the map, and she looks at all the X's around, and she kind of traces, where Northway is, because it's not on this map, so she writes it on that map, and she goes, okay, well, there's the Whitewood, that's where the Whitewood Temple was, to Arunani, and then here's Northway, and here's the Gulgith Pass. So the life well is there. I guess that's where she's headed. So Helga, after a while, unties the guy and says, all right, don't cause any more trouble. You're on your own. So the interrogation scene just kind of ends. She unties him off the post. She gives him his stuff back. And, he doesn't even ask for the dagger that she took from him. Not that she would give it back. And he actually stops and stays at the inn and tavern. He gets a room upstairs, and we never hear from him again. So he's off starting a new life. So Adir, got converted away from the path of evil that he was dragged into unwillingly in the first place. So Helga feels as though, she solved it in a non-violent way. she's put a fist on her hip and just like, yes, I did it. So she puts her cape back on. She goes upstairs. Orthick has since gone upstairs himself into a different room. He's obviously had a bit much to drink, so they will have to stay the night and get him up in the morning, and they will chase after the Red Mistress and the remaining members of the Tongues of Fire cult. So Helga spends time examining the map and comparing it to like her own knowledge and a local map that she has herself, just in case she loses somebody or something. And after that, they decide to head, just straight for it, straight for the Gulgith Pass. And it's about what you would expect. It's just a canyon westward that goes from southeast to northwest, and on the other side is the life well. So they just have to travel through it, and they should be fine. Now, as far as Orthick's tracking skills go, says that yes, some people, by the time they arrive at the mouth of this place, they said that yes, some people had gone through there very recently, but not very many people go there, according to the local scuttlebutt, if you will, the local lore and legends, and that word's going to escape me. Oh well. Where they say that there is a witch in Gulgith Pass that will chew up and eat anybody that wanders into her territory, and that kind of gives them pause, but for a moment, because they're on a Helga's on a holy quest to protect the locals, and freaking Orthick is there to shoot anybody wearing a cultist robe. So their hearts are in different places, but their goals are the same. So they forge on into darkness. Now, like I said, this canyon is not wide open like, say, the Grand Canyon. It's closed as though it collapsed, like a teepee almost. It's teepee-shaped, like a hallway. And so the sun does not get through very often. It's very dark in there. So they light up a torch, and they have dark vision. They're dwarves, so they can see, or low light vision rather. They're dwarves. They can see quite a ways, but their vision is not perfect. So they have to carry a light source, because in the absence of light there is no color. So things that can see in the dark can only see in black and white because there's no light. But carrying a torch, they wander further, and of course, after a while, they start finding remains. Like halfway through, they find remains. And Orthick kind of kicks over a skull or two, sees some bones, some torn up clothes and stuff like that, and just things that have been gnarled and chewed up, and some with relatively fresh gore. And they find the torn hood of one of the cultists, and they pull it up, and his head is still inside, and Helga kind of recoils. Ah! It's like something got this guy and chewed him up. So the legends or the stories of the Witch of Gulgith Pass or something lives in here, and it was big enough to chew this guy in half. So Helga's wondering if it's like a big like crocodile or dinosaur or something that could live in such a dry place, away from all the streams and farm fields and people. I'm wondering if it's like a mud dauber monster or something like that, something nasty that just like pops out and chews your ass up and then crawls back into its lair to wait for the next thing. So they look back and forth, and it's just kind of sheer wall. So there's not a lot of places for anything to hide around here. And they're rounding the bend, and they can hear something chewing on something, like an and they decide that they need to get around the corner quietly. So we roll like the stealth checks or whatever, the move silently that 5th edition has, because they pulled out half the damn skills for streamlining, and we try to sneak up to lean around the corner, But Orthick tramps over some more remains of people that had come before us and kicks some chainmail. And the skeleton that was inside the chainmail loses his head, and the helmet goes rolling and crumpling over into another rock. And whatever it was heard us because it stops eating, and immediately we hear a siren song. Like this beautiful, gorgeous song that makes you want to go towards the light, go towards the source. It's like a mind-affecting spell, and Helga rolls against it, and she succeeds. It does not affect her, but Orthick fails. So his crossbow ready just kind of sags down to his waist, and he wanders forward with his eyebrows up and his eyes wide, and he falls into a pit directly in front of him and breaks his leg. And what should come dashing around the corner but a harpy, a big bird creature with the face and front of a woman with giant clawed hands for feet, who sees that Orthick is down but Helga is not, so dashes in to do combat with her. And somebody who is ground bound versus a flying creature is never an easy fight. So Helga swings her hammer just as it's strafing by and doesn't even clip the thing, and it rakes across her shoulder. Ah! Pulls up the mason's hand mace and casts Cure Light Wounds on herself, and it dashes back, and they clash against each other. It sprays sparks across the front of her shield with its talons, and she whomps it upside the face to send it pinwheeling through the air, and it kind of bounces off the canyon walls and darts up into the sky again. And it has that helmet that Orthick had kicked in its claws, and it's just gonna pitch it at her. And Helga's like, "Oh, I'm gonna wait for this," and she holds her hammer back like she's just gonna baseball swing this thing. And the harpy spins around in a somersault and just throws it straight at her like it's going to clobber her with this helm that has a skeleton skull inside. And she wallops it with her hammer, sends it straight back into the harpy's face. And it hits the ground. And Helga grabs the hammer, drops her shield, grabs the hammer with both hands, and runs up to try and cave the thing's skull in. But it takes off before she can get to it, and it flies, dripping blood and feathers flying everywhere. It takes off further into the pass and out of sight. So Helga doesn't get the killing blow, but she chased it off. And after silence falls and she kind of looks around, the torch is laying on the ground, so it was a very poorly lit fight. But she puts her hammer back on the hook, and she grabs the torch, and she runs over to the pit where Orthick was, and she flings herself onto her belly. And I'm thinking, oh God, Orthick fell 50 feet, and I'm going to have to get a rope and pythons and get all the way down there and get him all the way out. And Helga sticks her nose over the edge of this pit. It's 4 feet deep. It's 4 feet deep. I've seen a grown man. I've read stories about grown men falling off of step ladders, hitting their head and dying. But it was kind of funny that Orthick fell into a pit 4 feet deep and broke his damn leg. I was like, you fucking idiot. Orthick! Expecting an abyss or something, that he's way down in this ravine. No, 4 feet away. So Helga turns around and she just kind of slides down on her hands and toes to get to Orthick. And he's like, oh, my leg. Helga, my leg, it's broken. And it's bent at this awful, gut-wrenching angle. It's how could you possibly have done that in 4 feet? But whatever. And it's then that the DM chooses to tell me that Orthick is not religiously affiliated. He's agnostic, and he has never witnessed divine magic. Now, obviously, he's chasing cultists, so he knows about magic in general, but he doesn't think that the gods give a damn about the material plane or the lives of mortals, so that healing magic, it's smoke and mirrors and trickery and, healing potions, that's where it's at. Or medicine, that's where it's at. There's no such thing as a healing spell. And it's weird how many characters I come across that don't believe in magic or don't believe in freaking healing, instant healing and stuff like that. And Helga's like, well, I guess it's time to make a believer out of you. And she puts her hands up, and of course the divine sparkles start to gather in from around her like she's getting ready to cast the spirit bomb onto him or something like that. So the land, the water, the grass, and the animals, all the servants of Tristilian, give me your power to heal Orthick. And Orthick is just like, get me a splint, what are you doing? And if you remember, when Helga leveled up, she got a divine channeling, which is either turn undead or a big heal spell once per day. So she's channeling all the denizens of the agriculture god with divine channeling. It's like, by the power of Grayskull, I mean Tristilian, I have the power! And her aura, her divine aura flares out in all directions. It lights the entirety of Gulgith Pass. And, Orthick is laying right next to her. Is like, Mordin's beard! Jesus Christ! Putting his arm over his face because she's blinding him with holy power and channels divinity into his face to heal his broken leg. And, we roll it, and it's like the maximum. It was like the perfect, not rolling a 20, but like the potential for the healing spell was like a D8 plus something. And rolled maximum heals, so it heals the broken bone. Tristilian is proud that I would put such great faith in him and all that stuff to heal this poor man's leg. But Orthick is like laying there like some anime character, his eyes in swirls and his mouth open. That Helga has channeled the divinity of God into him to heal a broken bone. So he gets up after a while, like rubbing the spots out of his eyes, kind of leaning on the stone wall, like, what was that? And Helga's like, that was the power of Tristilian, divine channeling. And she puts her hands together like she's a nun or something in prayer. And she kind of leans forward in a short bow, like, your leg is healed. Blessed be to Tristilian. And she kind of pats him on the head like a child. Do you believe now, Orthick? Do you believe now? And she grabs the rope and starts to haul herself out. And Orthick is like, yeah, I guess so. So he grabs the rope and climbs up after her. And, she made a believer out of an agnostic by shooting him in the face with holy lasers. But when they get out, they look around for the harpy because Lord knows it could lure him right back into that pit and make him break his other leg. But it seems that Helga's onslaught with her hammer was more than enough to chase it off for good and to make it look for easier prey. And they did, after looking about, they did find another cultist. So Adir is in town, about to start a new life, and the Red Mistress is the only one who is unaccounted for. So the harpy, tore up two of these guys, and they pick through their belongings. There's really nothing other than, there are foreign coins that aren't worth anything to them, and, the same map that they've already got, and their culty daggers, and they dig a couple of small holes and, bury the daggers so they're never found by anybody. Conjuration magic by suicide is not something that should ever be popular. But at the same time, they find the harpy's nest. And it's way up on like a stone outcropping, and Helga looks over at Orthick and is like, Orthick, I'm wearing chainmail, and rangers are more likely to have ranks in like climb or acrobatics or anything like that. So they take the grappling hook and they throw the rope up there, and Orthick makes the roll and he climbs all the way up into the harpy's nest, expecting like filth and rags and stuff, but just in case, she hauled like one of her kills up there. And sure enough, they find the mangled corpse of a half-orc who must have been an adventurer for all the toys he was carrying, because while he kind of like rolled the poor guy off, and Helga had to jump back so the corpse didn't land on her and explode. And she gives Orthick a dirty look while he's climbing down. But this guy had a lantern of revealing on him, which it's a bullseye lantern, but if you shine the light on stuff, it will reveal invisible things, which is incredibly useful. And a mantle of spell resistance, which gives you advantage to roll against any spell, just in general. It's like the most overpowered cape you can imagine. So if somebody casts like a mind-affecting spell or something on you, you can roll 2 d20s instead of 1, and you take the higher one. And it doesn't matter what the spell is, from any school, anywhere, you always have advantage to resist it. And I was like, wow. Why don't we give that to Orthick so that he doesn't wander into any more pits? So Orthick puts it about his shoulders. It's a little long for him, so Helga gets a couple of pins and kind of shortens it up a little bit. And she takes the lantern of revealing and sets it aside. And Helga is a somewhat pious person, so she takes out her little shovel, and they dig a grave and put the half-orc adventurer down in there. And, they looked him over for identification, an amulet with his wife inside, anything. There was just nothing there. So another victim of the harpy's claws and talons and fury. And they cover him up with earth, and, Helga sets down the incense and, says a prayer to Tristilian. They don't really bury the cultists, though. They were, not really worth the trouble, apparently. But Helga buries the adventurer, and Orthick, of course, helps and is quiet during the prayer. He's just learned the divinity exists, and the divine influence of God runs through this woman that he's with. So he's being kind of quiet after having witnessed her divine power. And they wander on. Oh wait, I got to backpedal. One other thing they found on the half-orc was a treasure map, which why they assumed it was a treasure map, I guess just because there was an X on it and there was a dotted line. And like, oh, this looks like a treasure map. So Orthick takes the treasure map as well because, hey, Helga doesn't need a ton of money. She patrols a certain region and has no need of riches. So she gives it to Orthick, and Orthick's like, well, according to this, the treasure is at the end of Gulgith Pass. It's just like, to the left is the light well, and to the right is the X on this map. And she goes, well, Orthick, we've got to catch up to the Red Mistress first, and then we'll go after your treasure. What do you say? And Orthick's like, yes, I know. Duty comes first. I understand. And he kind of puts the map in his bag and, picks up his crossbow again, making sure it's nice. He's admiring his new cape. He's like, hey, brand new magic item. That's pretty cool. And they wander onward to try and catch up with the Red Mistress. And I'm not entirely sure we're going to catch her before she gets to the life well, because she's got like 15 or 16 hours on us. I mean, we stayed the night at the inn because we had to interrogate Adir, and Orthick was drunk in bed somewhere. So she probably got like 12 or 16 hours on us. She's probably there already. So we trek ahead as fast as we can to catch up to her, because it's not likely that she can taint a body of water with fire magic, but let's run no risks, shall we? So we run all the way out there, and we finally emerge from Gulgith Pass, and the sun is blinding, and we let our eyes adjust for a while, and we see the beauty that is the life well, this perfectly circular lake, so big you can't see across it, and there's a big stone dock that goes out maybe 100 feet out into the water, and on the edge of it is somebody dressed in red culty robes, and we go, oh, there she is. We're just in time, and we tramp our way down the hillside, and we pass like a put-out campfire and a tent that was hastily ripped down. So she either heard us coming and ran down there to do whatever she was doing, or she camped out there for the night and was going to do stuff this morning. But she was by herself, having lost all of her companions. So, Orthick's got his crossbow, he's going to get the first shot in, and then Helga's going to bash her over the fucking head for whatever it is that she's doing and making these poor innocent Narik people do. In the meantime, threatening their families and tramping across the land into other gods' temples, summoning fire elementals. She's done enough evil. Helga is ready to put a stop to this. And, and it's Orthick's job, so he's going to shoot her in the fucking head anyway. So the two of them are ready to do battle, and they rush down this stone dock to run up behind her before she does whatever it is that she's doing. And she turns about just as they are arriving to be within range to start shooting at her. And she pulls out one of the culty daggers, and Helga's like, no, we're so close! And she gets ready to, throw her hammer, even though you can't really throw a hammer and do any damage. But the Red Mistress cuts her palm, and a portal rips open behind her to the elemental plane of fire, and she jumps in, and it closes behind her. And Helga, swings the hammer just where she was, just as the portal comes closed. And she's like, blast it, we had her, we were so close. Even 16 hours behind her, we almost had her, she got away. And Orthick kind of lowers his crossbow, the prey has escaped. There's no trail now. She's in another dimension. She's not going to leave a scent or a trail or tracks anywhere for a ranger to track down. So the trail has gone cold. Everybody else is dead except for Adir, who knows nothing other than this is where they were going. So the Red Mistress escaped us. And Helga kind of sits down and she bashes a fist onto the stone dock, and she puts her hammer back on its hook gosh, we almost had her, Orthick. What are we going to do? And Orthick has no response because, he can't really track people across dimensions, much less know the magic that could rip open a portal to follow her. And even if you could, would you want to go to the elemental plane of fire? No. Not without a lot of, defensive fire amulets and freaking 65 million sunscreen. So wherever she is gone, it is way the hell out of our level 2 reach. So, trying to regain her composure, Helga finally looks around, and the big long stone dock, the peaceful waters. It's almost like a mirror. It's not. I call it a lake, but it's more like a fountain almost. It's the water is clear and smooth as glass, and it reflects the sky, and it's never more than as deep as your waist in the furthest reaches of the inside. So around the edge, it just comes up to your ankle. And Helga goes, Orthick, this is a holy site. This is technically holy water, all of it. Tristilian laid down the life wells to serve as the gathering points for mortals early on, because hey, fresh water and all the plant life around here is healthy. This would be the ideal place to settle. And Orthick says, well, then why isn't there a town here? And she says, well, with Gulgith Pass right there, it must have become dangerous with harpies, and if you can't secure any good trade routes with other places, I guess you wouldn't want to actually settle here. But perhaps earlier on in the histories of man and dwarf, people stayed here or communed here or had pilgrimages here. And he comes and he sits next to her on the end of the dock, and Helga kind of folds her legs up into the lotus position and puts her palms on her knees and straightens her back and kind of looks out over the water, trying to find her center so she can figure out what to do from here. And Orthick, tries hard to get into the lotus position, but not everybody has legs that can do that. So he sits Indian style, and he puts his crossbow on his back. And Helga sets out the little cup and lights the incense and sits it there to kind of meditate / pray / clear her mind for a while, because this is a holy site. This is a good place to kind of commune and hope for inspiration. And she closes her eyes and she does the meditative stance, and Orthick kind of watches her for a while. She's already proven to him that God powers exist, so he's like, okay, well, I guess I'll try that too. He kind of tries to do the same pose that she does, and he takes a deep breath, and there's a silence between them. And all they hear is the breeze and the birds and the swish of the trees, and it's very, very silent, very tranquil. There's no fish in the water. It's like a big glass mirror, the whole thing. And Helga kind of, becomes one with nature to take deep breaths and try to figure out what she should do next. And who should come to offer her advice in the voice of a god? It is Tristilian who speaks to her directly. It's Helga Farfenkugr, and it's really, really funny to hear God say Farfenkugr. But, Helga Farfenkugr, you must pursue the tongues of fire cult. The Red Mistress is trying to bring Ignis, the Fire Lord, unto the very region where you shepherd the farmers and innocents of the land. And Helga gets like these brief flashes of like shadow and flame and like Balrog-shaped horrible things that are in the elemental plane of fire, that the Red Mistress is trying to pull this like demigod basically out into the material plane from the elemental plane of fire. Now, it might not actually be a god, but it's big and mean enough to mean that kind of business. Now, Tristilian, being a god of the material plane, cannot directly interfere because there are enough covenants with enough other gods that mortals must fend for themselves. So all he can offer her is advice and a small gift to see if she can put a stop to the Red Mistress and the flames, the Tongue of Fire cult. So while she is experiencing this vision, her skin begins to darken on one of her wrists, and a holy symbol appears, branded onto her from Tristilian himself. And I asked my DM what that means, and he says, if you ever lose your holy symbol, for like turn undead or healing spells, you can use this brand on your arm as though it were a holy symbol. So you are never, in the divine sense, you are never unarmed unless somebody chops your arm off. Then you're unarmed. I get it. But she doesn't have to carry a holy symbol anymore. So, the wood one, the golden one, the silver one that you have to pay for, she can put it away. And, the one on her arm is enough to cast Turn Undead or healing spells or whatever the holy symbol actually calls for. It's an instrument that you have to have in order to cast some divine spells. She doesn't need it anymore. So basically, Tristilian tells her that the Tongues of Fire cult, or those that remain, are her problem, unless she wants to see Ignis the Fire Lord burn down all of these farms and burn up all of these people and all their animals, etc., under the under the command of the Red Mistress. So when Helga awakes from her vision and she turns her arm over, the brand is actually there, and Orthick sees it, and he's like, what did you see? You were kind of writhing there for a minute. And she tells Orthick what she saw. Well, she didn't see the face of God, but she heard God, and God says, go chase these guys down, or go get this bitch, before she burns the entire region to the ground and reduces the countryside to ash. So, no longer the wandering folk hero. She has been charged with a holy quest to slay the Red Mistress and stop Ignis the Fire Lord. So, that is where we stopped that time around. So I guess that's where I'll stop today. I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and I hope you guys are enjoying, the adventures of Helga Farfenkugger. And I will see you guys on the next D&D stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I really love telling D&D stories, and I also really love eating food. So if you'd like to toss a couple of gold pieces into this humble bard's hat, be sure to check out my Patreon. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button as well. And if you'd like access to maps, character art, and channel updates too, check out the D&D Stories Facebook. Keep gaming!